What's up, everybody? Happy New Year. It's time for another TED Talk. Today, I want to encapsulate some thoughts and some rants and some soapboxes that I've had recently in post games with various smart folks that I've been playing with. And what we're going to talk about is Blitz, really Legion in general, but specifically in regards to Blitz because that's my uh, fever dream thought experiment. I don't know. And Shatterpoint and AMG's sameness problem. Because from like a design business perspective, being in the games industry, this is an interesting problem that they have to square. As usual, because it's time to do a TED Talk, I'm getting over a cold. So my, voice is even more made for TV and my face is even more made for radio than usual. I apologize. But I don't know. Maybe the coding gives us ideas. I can't tell. Oh, hang on. There we go. All right. So quick recap. If you're new, I don't know why you would be. Go watch the other videos, I guess. Blitz. It's a 3x3 adaptation of Legion. Basically, most of your Legion game fits on a 3x3 anyway, or just about. Um, it makes all the objectives far more interactable, so there's no sort of like just runaway scenarios. Raises the floor on turn 0, so you can't really put yourself in too big of a hole. It spices up a lot of units and upgrades, and it's just faster, more intense. Uh, Deploying becomes really tense. Everything's in a lot of stuff is in range all the time. Everything's not in range all the time. Your snipers will need to move to get shots and stuff. It still all works. You can get your own Blitz battle deck at legionblitz.com. Or if you dig around, there's another video that has a cheat sheet that you can print off to just like do a conversion yourself on paper. All the rules for the game are the same rules. It's just an unofficial upgrade to layout and how to play. And you know about Star Wars Legion, or you wouldn't be here. All right. Shatterpoint. Shatterpoint's also on a 3x3. It also has Star Wars dudes. It has cross-compatible terrain. It's objective-based, but it has fewer models, right, on the table. Okay, if you're a casual human at a game store, think about this perspective. You're a casual human at a game store, you like Star Wars, you see these two tables set up, games being played. Can you really tell the difference between this game and this game? They both have movement tools, they both have cards. Like, yeah, they're different sizes, but you see what I'm saying? Like, to a casual observer, there's a like, oh wait, you guys are playing two different Star Wars games, right? Like that's a thing, right? All right, so then, and because the terrain's compatible, the terrain on the two tables could even look almost the same. And they're both full of Star Wars dudes, and the dudes are not hugely different in scale. They're very different in terms of proportion when you get up close, but as like a, just walking through the store looking at board games, that guy is like, oh, huh? All right. And there's weird business overlap, right? Sculpt investment is going to get shared across products. This pushes release to overlap. So these games have the same IP, very similar board sizes, regardless of which version of Legion you're talking about here. They have the same kinds of stuff. The numbers of things is different, but right, like, and as sculpt investment, right? Because sculpt investment is the big upfront art cost. I mean, they're doing these the same way all the 3D print guys are doing them, right? You build the pieces, you rig them up, then you pose them X number of ways until you get everything approved and what you're happy with, and then you touch up if you need to. So they've, paid the investment to get the clone commando. They probably have like a rig and then like an animation or whatever that modifies that rig to get the proportions right from the one system to the other system or vice versa. That's how I would do it as a professional art maker for video games for 15 years. I would not be redoing these from scratch. That would save me a lot of money. Of course, that's how they should do it. But it's going to exacerbate the sameness problem, right? You have two products in the market competing for kind of the same humans' dollars. They have to be into wargaming. Oh, I gotta be on screen. Gotta be into wargaming. They gotta be into Star Wars. And then the games look really similar, right? Like this gets weird. This gets weird. Um, so as we're talking here, right, there's few differentiators. Traditional Legion, bigger map. Blitz, same size map, right? So I'm really, I got to this thinking about like if you're AMG, why wouldn't you do the Blitz thing and go to a 3x3? And there's a compelling argument. Well, I don't know if it's compelling, but there is an argument that's like I can't go to 3x3 because then it looks too much like Shatterpoint. I have this problem. They have two things in the same market that I'm responsible for both of them. So I can't do that deal. So we're going to try to differentiate more other ways, right? These are these low-hanging differentiators. I think these are very risky. More points. Just add more points to Legion. Then you'd have more stuff. Then the games are more different, right? Because it's pretty doable in Legion to run like a sub 20 model army and have it be game night competitive. It's probably not going to be Worlds competitive, but it'd be game night competitive, right? Versus, eight dudes aside. So you're only, double. Ooh, I've got 16 guys. I've got 18 guys, whatever it is. It's not huge. It's a tiny number, right? And some of the Shatterpoint dudes are 3 chumps glued onto one base, right? And so like visually it's noisy. It looks like more things than just the 8 bases. But more points. We know from history, Alex Davies said, before the game launched, they had written everything up as 1,000 points aside. Okay, and then they said, and he's said this in at least one stream, probably more than one. The game was originally 1,000 points. And a couple months out from launch, they changed the rule book because games were just taking too long. They knocked it down to 800 to get the game time right. Right, and so if you just throw more points at it, you're just straight up increasing game time. And the way the alternating activations work, it's going to be really hard to convince everybody not to just act pad. If you just went up to 1,000 points from 800, like if I'm an Empire player, is that not just 3 free bikes every time? I think that's just 3 bikes every time. I've got to figure out how to scrape together like 20 points or something to make that work. Yeah, right. If you didn't have 3 strike teams, you have them now. And some upgrades, right? Like act advantage is too meaningful for points to not just equal more activations, which means more time. Right? I mean, even just the time to move more dudes and more models on the table becomes a problem. Which is going to be longer playtime, which means it's harder to do tournaments, which means blah, 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 right? And the buy-in gets steeper, right? Like, one of the great things about Legion, I know we all bemoan, like, price hiking over time and whatever, and, like, that's complicated, and I don't want to argue about inflation and whatever, but Legion is way cheaper than Warhammer. Way cheaper. Anything you do to cut into your buy-in kind of hurts your market accessibility, right, to some degree. So I think the obvious differentiators at the bigger table size are a problem. I think the smaller table size gives you all these great gameplay benefits. So now you've got to figure out, how do we square this business problem, right? Now what? This is the Venn diagram, right? You all know a Venn diagram. It's the two circles, right? So imagine the white box is the market, right? That this represents all the humans that would possibly buy a Star Wars wargaming game. The blue circle is Legion, and the yellow circle is Shatterpoint. And I think in reality these circles are much closer right now, right? Like they're almost one circle. There's a little bit on one edge and a little bit on another edge. I'm in the edge. I'm just buying Legion. I am not painting another Darth Vader. I'm out. I'm done. If Shatterpoint came out first, I would probably be in the opposite boat, where I'd be like, I am not buying into that game. I've already painted 2 Darth Vaders, and that game already has 2 more Darth Vaders. They've lost their minds. So this is the thing. This is a weird thing. You've got to decide, how are you going to resolve the market, maximizing profit, given these 2 things? Right, so think about the 2 axes of this box as, I don't know, one side is scale, people who want a big game versus a small game. Skill maybe is another axis, right? You could think of different quadrants to sort of define the market and the types of consumers that would buy different types of games. And I don't want to get too in the weeds on that. But what I do want to think about here is, what are they trying to do? Right? And I think if they have to keep these, right? Because remember, Shatterpoint pre-exists the merge, the effort or the transfer, however you want to phrase that point in time, right? Shatterpoint, because we know how long these things take to develop, all the molds to get made, all the stuff to get printed, everything to get approved, everything to get shipped, right? Like Shatterpoint was in the pipeline well in advance of Asmodee handing Legion over to AMG. So Shatterpoint was designed to compete in this market, right? AMG was walking into this thing being like, there's already a circle in this box. We're going to have another circle too, and we're going to try to win, right? Turn a profit, whatever that means, whatever win means. It doesn't necessarily mean they're mutually exclusive. We don't understand the business dealings. We don't understand the licensing deals. We don't understand how Asmodee umbrellas all these things and so on, right? Lots of unknown things on the business front. But they originally intended to compete. We can know that, right? So now you've got a studio that's got 2 things that are directly competing with one another. Just because there's a finite amount of dollars and time that humans are available to spend. Right, and even if somebody buys both things, if they only go to the store and play the one, that one thing's going to win out over time because more people are going to see the people playing that game, and then they're going to buy that one more over, right? Like, so it'll skew. So this is interesting, right? They could try to smoosh these circles apart more and get them bigger, so each one kind of conquers as much of its half as possible, and they overlap a little bit in the middle, which I think is probably my fear. That is the thing I am maybe the most worried about. I don't know. I don't know if I'm worried about it as much as I'm curious. I think that pushes Legion more, right? Legion will become more different more rapidly as a result. Instead of, I think, addressing its core problems for what is a mostly very good game. And so this, this thing gets weird, and it gets into studio structure. Do you have the personnel to run them as 2 completely separate teams? Do you have the personalities that are able to compete with one another for the market? Let one team kind of win, but the other team kind of know they're not going to lose their jobs no matter what. We'll just move you on to this other thing. You've probably got other projects cooking already anyway. You'll just full-time on those instead of part-time, and make that work. I've worked places where that would be fine. It comes down to the people you've got, right? Whether or not you can sort of set it up that way. and just find out, because the risk here is you push these things further apart and the circles actually get smaller, right? They overlap less, and you're like, oh, it's good, we're differentiating more, but we're actually buying less total market share than if like just Legion won or just Shatterpoint won, because then it would have all the gravitational pull of all the Star Wars IP on its own, right? And so there's a case of like, well, if we let them fight, right, like Godzilla and King Kong, maybe we end up with only one game, but we end up with one game that, almost covers this whole square. It doesn't get the people way over here on the edge that were only really into Legion, or would only be into a Legion kind of game, or vice versa, right? So I don't know. This is a really interesting problem. Now, what do I think Legion should actually do? I think the problem with the sameness between these two products has nothing to do with the table size. I think it has everything to do with the types of units that are being produced for Legion specifically. So, do we have our cake? It's not about how big the board is, it's about what's on the board. Here are all cool things that are not in Legion. I'm trying to remember. Do we have like a solid year of previews and releases, and everything's been a trooper unit, and then just a re-release of the ATST? And like Mark 1's just a new unit card. Is that right? And like a new Flutter card for the Wookiees. That might be right. And that's a serious problem. If you have an 8 dudes game and you want to have an army game that feels like an army, the problem is the types of things. You can't keep making troopers. We haven't had a new creature trooper since Dubaks and Tauntauns. That's crazy. There's this whole abandoned unit archetype. There are no emplacements in clones and droids. Right, the sonic cannon is right there. He's right there. He's on screen. Never mind my Battlefront nostalgia. Got the Hasbro troop transport. You love to see this gangly goober. The defense pod. Why don't we have that thing? If all of the stuff for Legion was big stompies, it wouldn't matter what size the board was. You'd be like, oh, this is the one with the big stompies. That's the one with the dudes having a duel. I get that. That makes sense. Everything else could be the same, but this one, the table's covered in big stompies, and this one, the table's covered in dudes. Lightsaber dudes. That makes it make sense. Have your cake, eat it too. We have to stop making troopers. This is the problem with the state of Legion design. Look at this little copter. Great. The hover tank. Yeah. Battlegrounds is the best. Big old Fombas. Where are these guys at? Would you rather have Ewoks, or would you rather... Look at this. We got Ewoks and we didn't get a catapult. We didn't get the hang glider. We got the stupidest part of Ewoks, which is Ewoks. Hang gliders could have been sweet models. Catapult would have been cool too. It's just, it's oh no, these circles overlap too much. Well, yeah, you're literally releasing the same thing. You're making two games with exactly the same stuff. And like, I understand this from a financial perspective. And like, these are cool dudes, but like, like you can look at the Leias, the indoor Leia that's been previewed for Shatterpoint, and then the sort of updated sculpts, right, that are coming for Legion, and it's just heads and hands are a little bigger, but it poses a little different. It's the same model. And like I get that, but like make a part of a box, whatever. Get to it when you get to it. We need big stompies, right? Legion for a long time has sort of backed itself into this corner with critical. This has been talked about a lot elsewhere, but diversifying unit types would allow there to be more rock, paper, scissors, right? The problem is everybody has a blaster. Critical always gets through armor and cover. So there's no sort of like, I need spear guys to fight your horse guys and your horse guys to fight my archers. And like that thing is complete. It's just who generates more critical hits, right? Or has the tech to skip it. So that's a thing. That's a weird thing. And if they could push into this space more, there's room to add keywords. If creature troopers were more prevalent and every force had a couple of them, like you could start really doing something with that keyword. If emplacement troopers were more widespread, you could really do more with that keyword, right? Like I think making them where you can't move through them was great. It makes them a little harder to drive and sort of like not get in your own way, which, you know, we've had with ground vehicles for a long time. But that sort of stuff, it makes them a more dynamic part of the battlefield. Maybe they all need infiltrate. I don't know, you know, something. That would really move the needle as well. But to me, this is the actual problem. The actual differentiator problem is the stuff on the table. You cannot keep having similar releases. You can't have Bad Batch in the one and Bad Batch in the other. We can't keep doing that. I mean, there's going to have to be some of that because of heroes. It is Star Wars. We have iconic things. But Legion needs to focus on the big, stompy, iconic things, not on these dudes. I don't know if my system audio was on. You heard that really loud. You got an email bell, but it was really loud for me. All right, there you go. That's today's TED Talk. If you haven't, check out Blitz. You can play it in the mod. It's great. You can play it in person. You can get cards at legionblitz.com, and you could get your own little cheat sheet if you just want to use your normal battle deck and then convert your deployment zones. That's available on the Google Drive. Link in the description of that other video and probably this one too. There you go.